So I'm Joy Howard. I'm a mom of two small children, and I live in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And I'm here today just to get explanation on the vaccine and primarily surrounding children.
Okay. May I ask how old your children are?
They are 3 and 7.
Okay. So I'm Lilly Immergluck. I'm actually a pediatrician. I'm also a pediatric infectious disease specialist. And thirdly, being at Morehouse School of Medicine, I'm also what they call a population health service researcher. I'm the principal investigator for our participation in the U.S. COVID Prevention Network, which is really the network that is serving kind of a pipeline for the different vaccine products that are coming through targeting SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19 infections.
So my first question is, why do children, if they have COVID, they don't display any symptoms, if anything? Can you explain why that would be?
So first of all, I think in the early phase of the pandemic, a lot of the attention was focused on the people who were getting sick and having to receive hospital care, and children weren't the predominant population. That being said, as time has moved forward, the conversation around children and children's roles in being susceptible to COVID-19 infection has changed. And I don't know if the media is able to keep up with it because, with the evidence through different people reporting on it, I'm not sure. But children definitely, number one, can be infected. Number two, they can transmit it to other people, especially in their household, people who are in their close contact network. And I think that, sorry. I'm just going to shut that off. Sorry. But anyway, they can get it infected, and the diseases and infections in children are becoming more apparent. You may or may not know this, but we're actually looking at doing pediatric studies in these vaccine trials because we recognize that the pediatric and adolescent population is a population that hasn't been factored in as far as trying to understand and raise the immunity against SARS-CoV-2.
So if children weren't a part of, that population wasn't part of the trials, should they or will they be able to get the current vaccines that are out?
So just as with anybody now in the priority groups, that's based on the different phases of the clinical trials. So the vaccine development process, and I think this part gets a little murky for some folks, but what's not been shortchanged is the phases of the vaccine development that as far as clinical trials. So we're hearing a lot about the phase 3 clinical trials, which is the point of phase 3 clinical trials is really to get the numbers of volunteers in it so that we can understand the vaccine efficacy. But what people don't hear about is the phases that have occurred already, phase 1 and phase 2, actually the preclinical stuff, because those were the phases where we were looking at, number one, safety, and then second, dosing, like what's the right dose to use, and then lastly also the immunogenic response or the antibody response that we might have. Now, the way that for vaccines typically, we start with healthy adult population, and then once we determine that for adult healthy population it works and it's effective and it seems like it's safe, then we move to other populations in the adult side. In our case, for the COVID-19 vaccines, we're looking at older age groups, people, communities of color, because those groups have been disproportionately affected by severe infection. Then we look at people who might have what we call comorbidities, diabetes, heart disease. As we develop that data and understand how the vaccine works, then we start moving it down to the next younger group. So then it's like for example, Pfizer's actually EUA, emergency use authorization, approved for 16 and up. Moderna is 18 and up, and then we'll move it down to 12 12 to 18, and then we keep on going down until we get down to the lower end of the age spectrum. I do want to make sure that we're clear that when we say this is Moderna and Pfizer are FDA emergency use authorization, that is not the same as we say with like Pneumovax or Haemophilus influenza type B or flu vaccines that we have traditionally and standardly been using. Those have gone through kind of post-licensure studies, and so we're still gathering data on all the people that were in the trials from the Moderna and the Pfizer. We've just said, in this pandemic, because we saw that it was such a high efficacy for people who had moderate to severe disease, we've got to roll it out to save lives.
And so I guess there's an ETA or no, 2 years, a year for when children will have to be or should be vaccinated. Since they're not in the trials, I guess that period, we just don't have a time frame for that, right?
I would say Dr. Fauci probably has a better sense and finger on the pulse of exactly timing-wise. I'm kind of like on the ground worker bee, trying to participate in the trials as fast as I can, as far as trying to get it so that we can enroll the children, analyze the data, and then be able to roll it out similar to what we see is happening for the adults right now.
And do you think infants will be a part of that study too?
Just like if you look at some of the other vaccines that have been developed, and we don't see disease from that very much anymore. That's how they did it: adults, younger, and then younger all the way down to infants. So some of the diseases that cause meningitis, for example, I'm sure maybe your kids got those as well. When I teach the medical students and residents about, when I was a resident, Haemophilus influenza type B, meningitis was something I saw like almost every time I was on call. They don't know what that is. They have to read the textbooks in order to understand about the diseases that are caused by this germ, because we do such a good job with vaccinating our communities. And in fact, if you look at Georgia, and you see that the herd immunity that people keep referring to, that's been achieved with Haemophilus influenza type B, or Streptococcus pneumoniae is another pathogen that we've also achieved really good herd immunity.
And speaking of like the flu vaccine, I know when I was pregnant I had caught the flu, but I wasn't able to get the medication for it. I don't know if this COVID vaccine, is there any over-the-counter drugs that we should not use before we take the vaccine or afterwards?
So I think as far as contracting COVID and what medications are safe, the best answer to me is to talk with your primary care doctor or your obstetrician, mainly because I think of everybody as a unique individual who have factors that need to be taken into consideration. And although we can say broad things like, Tylenol is safe for you, or different over-the-counter medication, to me, especially as a primary care physician, to give that guidance on a one-on-one, I definitely want to know all the other things that might keep me from saying, okay, yeah, sure, Tylenol is safe for you. But in general, for COVID infections, what I've been recommending for people is, to take medicines that are over the counter, which reduce fever and myalgia, so supportive care. But I also believe like taking, pretty hefty doses of vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, because I want to boost the immune response to kind of handle the virus.
And so is it safe for pregnant women to take the COVID vaccine?
Currently, for both the Moderna and Pfizer, which are FDA emergency use authorization approved, they are saying that pregnant is not a contraindication to taking the vaccine. We have in our study team, one of our program manager actually, she's pregnant and she just got her Pfizer through Children's, not this past Friday, but the Friday before. So, that's an anecdotal case, but I can tell you that it is, pregnancy is not a contraindication to taking these EUA approved drugs, vaccines.
And I've heard, hearsay of course, that in order to kind of expedite the process of getting people vaccinated, that there may be healthcare workers trained to give the vaccine?
So I can tell you here at Morehouse School of Medicine, what I've spent last week doing in between the vaccine trial is we've been training our medical students who volunteer so we can teach them how to do administer vaccines. Now, typically during your first, second, third, fourth years of medical school, you don't necessarily get that training, but the state of Georgia Department of Health has come up with a list of people who are healthcare workers who can be trained to give vaccines. So these are like students in healthcare education. So we have our PA students, our medical students, because the bottom line is, we don't want the reason that people are not able to get vaccine in their arms due to a shortage of healthcare workers who can give it to them. And as you know from the news and other sources, we are in a crunch here with available healthcare workers to take care of patients in the hospital, and also even in the community settings.
So what would your recommendation be to the safest way to get the vaccine? Is your primary care doctor, a health department, your local pharmacy? Like, what would be the safest place to get the vaccine?
All of those would be, because to me, anybody who's going to give the vaccine to protect against COVID-19 has to go through making sure their site has the infrastructure, what we call the cold chain process of handling the vaccine, storing it, okay, knowing how to mix it, knowing how long it can stay at room temperature or in the fridge or the freezer. We have to go through a certification process. Once that happens, to me, anybody who's licensed or has been trained in the appropriate setting and meets the criteria set forth by our Department of Health should be able to administer the vaccine. So all of those scenarios that you gave to me, those have that capability.
And they will have to be certified by the different pharmaceutical companies because some have a different, storage process. Okay.
So each of the vaccine sponsors of the emergency use authorized vaccine products have a manual and a very step-by-step process outlining how to do exactly what you just said. Furthermore, CDC has developed what they call V-Safe program, so that, like I said earlier, this is emergency use authorized, right? So we still want to collect the data on everybody who's getting the vaccine, right? So this is a way for CDC to collect that in real time. So like, for example, as I was getting my second dose, or my first dose and my second dose, I registered literally while I was standing in line to wait my turn at the hospital, and it gives me a text alert, and every day I get that text alert. I just kind of go through it and check off any symptoms or what I might have. Yeah. And also it allows me to contact somebody if I had questions about it. We at Morehouse School of Medicine have created a 1888 number so that we can be a source for our communities to ask questions about COVID-19 vaccine trials, testing, anything that they think that might impact their health and wellness surrounding SARS-CoV-2, because we want to be a trusted source for our community.
And so anyone who gets the vaccine, I guess it wouldn't be mandatory for them to kind of monitor their symptoms. Is it voluntary to give that information?
It is voluntary. Okay. I hope people do that because I think it's important. I think if we want to continue to look at the safety profile as well as the durability. I have a big question about how long does it last to have these 2 injections? I know now that, I can say with some degree of confidence I'm not going to get moderately or severely ill, but I have very high risk members in my household. So I worry every day as I'm rolling around that I might still be able to transmit it, or that my antibody level is not going to keep me from getting mild disease or asymptomatic disease. I hope with time that we're going to know that information, because I keep recording, information in my V-Safe program.
And is it too early to know if this will be an annual vaccine or just a one-time, you'll get it once, the shot once, vaccine once, and you don't have to ever get it? I don't know if it's too early to kind of tell that information yet.
It is because, first of all, that goes back to your durability. So if we look at flu vaccine, for example, we know that because of the changes year to year of the flu vaccine flu strain that's running around, that we try to make adjustments in the prediction in the vaccine that's for that year, right? So we don't know any of that right now for COVID vaccines. All this information about the mutations that have occurred and what that means for us, I think a lot of that still is yet to be determined as far as what frequency, if any, we're going to need to get that COVID-19 vaccine.
That makes sense. Andy, you want to ask your questions?
I had a question about herd immunity. Like, what is it going to take for us to get herd immunity? Any idea?
So that's a really good question. So in general, for herd immunity, and let me just clarify that I'm on the same page with you about the definition for herd immunity. When I think about herd immunity, I think, what is the number of people that have antibody levels sufficient that if they got exposed to SARS-CoV-2, they are not going to get sick, and nor will they transmit it. That, if we get high enough numbers, that's going to allow the people that might not have antibody, so they're susceptible, to be essentially protected. Second, that's also going to allow for eventually, we hope, that there won't be circulating virus around, and that it's just going to go and dwindle and go away. So that's the kind of immunity when I think about herd immunity. And really, we need our nation, the population in our country or in your community, to be kind of somewhere 70% and up, roughly. So that's a daunting number when you think about where we are now and the estimates based on whatever tracker you're looking at, of as far as who's got disease and developed antibody level, who's been vaccinated and have antibody level. In both of those groups, durability still isn't known, okay? But best case scenario is that they do have durability and sustainability of their antibody levels. And if we can get everybody up to that point, then we can start to change that story about what that norm is for the masking and the social distancing.
I think that's what we're kind of anxious about. So my questions were answered. I thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
While we got you here, I'm trying to think. What was the reason why you wanted to get the vaccine?
Well, that would be an easy one for me to answer. Namely, because I am in a work setting where I get exposed potentially. Actually, honestly, at this point, I would say because of the numbers of people that are asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, that everybody is probably in the same situation as me. But I wanted to protect myself so that I didn't get moderate to severe disease. I am also very hopeful that they're going to find out that my 2 doses at least is going to protect my family. Because as I mentioned, I have a high risk. I have a 94-year-old father who asked me, he lives in Michigan, he asked me every time I call him, when am I going to come up to see him? And I haven't been able to say when, but I'm hoping that he will get his vaccine because he still hasn't yet. So that's the disparities that's happening from state to state as far as the equity of distribution of these vaccine doses. But yeah, that's why I got the vaccine.
And are you telling, let's say the data comes back and children are now part of the vaccine trials, like what does that look like when a child is involved in a vaccine trial? What does that even look like? Because, we're adults, you're volunteering
right.
as an adult
right.
saying, I'd like to participate, but children don't have that luxury.
Right.
So parents of children or their legal guardian are responsible for decisions made on their behalf. And so it's very, very important. So I'm a pediatrician, and most of my studies are really centered around children. And so having the making sure and listening to the parents' concerns, addressing all of them on behalf of their child before they want to think about participating in any trial is important. So we take a lot of time in our trial here for adults. Because we knew the challenges that we are facing surrounding vaccine hesitancy. We've allowed up to 4 hours for each participant to come in. We don't want them to be rushed. We've created this 1888 number for them because we want people to feel like they understand it's 100% voluntary, and they have to understand the elements of it at whatever level that they need it to be explained, or and so on. So for children, it's even more important for that to happen. Now, in pediatric studies, we also get not just the informed consent from the adult, but at a certain age, we anticipate that based on their cognitive development, that they also have to give what we call an assent. So we can't just, say, okay, mom or dad or said it's okay. We need to make sure they understand it at their level.
Are there any children that should not be a part of the trial if they have some sort of pre-existing condition or underlying health issues? Is there some sort of prerequisite for a kid to be a part of the trial?
So because we are not even at that point where we're talking about the construct or the study design of the inclusion of different age groups in the pediatric spectrum, those factors will be factored in as well, just like the adult studies. So the details right now, are being worked out under the U.S. COVID Prevention Network, but we don't have any that are out there recruiting for that as far as the younger children.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, doctor, for doing this and standing in the, sitting in the cold and rain and.
No, it's important. We are in a pandemic. I would like, I feel like I have more hope just actually since Wednesday, but that probably shouldn't be on the camera there. But anyway, it's really important that we all do what we can as far as giving the information out there, making sure that people understand the information we're giving, listening to our communities. It's so important, listening, because everybody has their different lens that they're looking from. And so we need to be able to adjust our information to attend to that perspective.
It's good to have firsthand information because it can be it's overwhelming, to just read headlines or listen to someone who has one particular perspective, and then it can cloud your judgment, and then you just may give up. But this is very informative, like firsthand. I'll be able to share. Courses will come out, but I'll be able to share my experience and really give an opinion, an informative opinion.
And I think there's a lot of credible sources out there, and I do want to. We're trying to curate some of that together. Again, I feel like people go to their trusted communities that are that they have to serve in that capacity. Morehouse School of Medicine, all that Nicole does, and I mean our whole marketing and our team work on this very diligently because we know we are a trusted source for our communities. We have a community advisory board of different leaders from the community to help guide us on what is the best way to message. What's the best way to reach out to our faith-based organization, to our other healthcare settings out in the community, in the rural areas. We have a research mobile unit that we utilize to help keep us connected to people who can't necessarily come to Morehouse School of Medicine. So those are just some of the examples to me that we are trying to reach out to people that trust us to give them the best information.